Ooh, hi, it's live. Fantastic. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kate. I want to thank you all for coming this evening to the Hempfield Community Belonging Initiative's info session. We're all here this evening to discuss opioid awareness and naloxone. Brand name is Narcan. You may have heard it referred to as that as well. Hempfield Community Belonging Initiative is a group of folks who live in Hempfield, so residents and community leaders in the greater Hempfield area who have come together with a mission to provide inclusive and open dialogue and programming for our neighbors, to learn about issues that are relevant to our community. And with a vision, that we hope that conversation helps us create an environment where everybody feels welcome in our neighborhoods and in our communities, and where we talk about the things that truly matter in our community, which opioid awareness is absolutely something that impacts every community. That includes Hempfield. So thank you all for being here to learn and to join in tonight. Thank you to our host this evening, Zion Lutheran, for having everybody here. Thank you also to our organization partners and sponsors this evening. Penn Medicine LGH's Lancaster County Joining Forces has provided naloxone kits for everybody in attendance this evening, so you can walk out with a kit. And our community partner as well, Compass Mark, is here this evening, and they have also provided some things that you'll see after the presentation. We'll invite everybody to join us to grab a kit, and also some literature, some prevention information. Tonight we're talking about harm reduction, but we also have some information from our friends at Compass Mark about prevention. So this evening will be led by my friend Simon Jarofsky, who is a Hempfield resident and a paramedic and firefighter. Simon has a lot of experience working in both the local community as a firefighter, but also in a very busy, outside of Baltimore, right? Anne Arundel County is just outside of Baltimore. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce you to Simon and let him take over. He's gonna educate us all this evening, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody. Let's see, hold on, I have to adjust a little bit. Is that good? All good? All right. A little closer? All right, we'll try. Well, thank you for having me. Like Ms. Linton said, my name is Simon Jarofsky. I'm a firefighter paramedic with the Anne Arundel County Fire Department. If you're unfamiliar with Anne Arundel County, go to Baltimore City, straight south. That's us. BWI, if you've ever flown out, BWI is right in the middle of Anne Arundel County. Annapolis, Glen Burnie, where I work. South Glen Burnie is where we're at. Yes, sir. Yes, I'm going to work on that. I am always a fast talker, so please don't be afraid to slow me down. So identifying opioid emergencies, which is hopefully the next slide. We'll get there. Perfect. So identifying opioid emergencies and steps to take when an emergency arises. I'm not going to sugarcoat a lot of things. I think that's important, but I'm not here to tell people not to do drugs. People do drugs. I get it. I hope you don't do drugs. But it's what to do when you find somebody who's having an emergency. That's what I do, and you're going to learn a lot in this PowerPoint today, that there is so much that I can do in the perfect time frame. And if I don't have that time frame to work with the help of you people, I can't do anything. You call 911 to help you. The biggest gut punch I ever get, and it usually happens once a day, is when I show up and I can't help you, and it's too late. So hopefully identifying that. So a little bit about myself on the next slide, just to kind of run down what I threw together and what Ms. Linton was talking about. So I started my career in the city of Harrisburg, working for UPMC Life Team EMS. Man, if I could summarize Harrisburg, it is surprising. So I mapped it from right here. It is 34 minutes with traffic to Harrisburg. When I was in Harrisburg in 2020, it was the most dangerous city in America per capita. People don't understand that. It was more dangerous than Philadelphia, more dangerous than Baltimore, more dangerous than Chicago and Los Angeles and New York. 50,000 people in 7 square miles, and there's a whole lot of not good stuff. It is a beautiful city, though. I love it. I spent 18, 19, 20 those years there, and I learned so much. It's a wonderful place. I was also with Manheim Township Fire Rescue, and then as a live-in firefighter EMT. And then in 2021, I was hired and worked down in Anne Arundel County, which is a large county fire and EMS system, which we'll talk a little bit about too. Started at Station 21, which is Harmons Dorsey. If you guys are familiar with A run-of-the-mill mall, very large mall, Maryland Live Casino, BWI is all right there, a major highway hub on the way to DC. And then just back in September, I was promoted to firefighter paramedic, and now I'm at Station 26 in South Glen Burnie. Incredibly busy. I am very back to doing the busyness, the unfortunate bad side of the community. And then you'll find me around in the community at Wellspan EMS. I work part-time based out of Ephrata, New Holland, and Leola. So, easiest question to start with. The next one, hopefully. So what are opioids? Everybody talks about them, everybody knows about them, but what exactly is it? So on the next slide, the definition of an opioid. This is from the CDC themselves. So an opioid is a class of drug that derives from or mimics the natural substances found in an opium poppy plant. And opioids work on the brain in different neuroreceptors and a variety of effects, but mainly it's for pain relief. Opioids are given for amazing pain relief. It does wonderful things, but it can go too far, which we're seeing in our communities. Originally, they were developed in the 1990s, and you saw things like OxyContin or oxycodone generically, Vicodin, morphine. These were the drugs that were being distributed in our pharmacies and our communities from doctors for pain. That's what we were giving people, but there was very little public education. It was just, yep, here's some pain meds, it'll take it away, because nobody wants to be in pain. Nobody wants to live life in pain. So the less pain you're in, the happier you are, but unfortunately that became more drugs, and there was not education about it on what happens to your brain, to your body, when you're under the influence of opioids. And with that, side effects spiraled, people were not taught about it, and overdoses quickly skyrocketed through the pills. And then we saw, on the next slide, the first wave of deaths entering America. You were seeing a rise in prescription-related deaths go from just about 3,500 in 1999 across the country. About 3,500 people overdosed and died from prescription-related deaths. And then in 2010, that increase rose to just under 13,000. So that was a 262% increase in just about 10 years. That's monstrous. That's not concurrent with our population growth. That is not good. And doctors and pharmacy companies and insurance companies were seeing that, and government was seeing that. And because of the rise of deaths, a lot of people lost their prescriptions. JCO, which is a hospital organization or a government monitoring group that has rules for hospitals and rules for doctors that they have to follow. One of them is you have to treat somebody in pain. You cannot deny somebody relief of pain. And unfortunately, they were taking away pain pills and giving substitutes that were not opioids. And unfortunately, they're just not as strong. And that's where you saw, pardon me, a lot of people turn to not sanctioned resources, i.e. drug dealers. Because they were getting their pain pills taken away. And it wasn't, I'm a fiend, it's not, I'm a drug addict, it's, I hurt. And they were going to do whatever it takes to get the pain to go away. And you can still buy illegal pills. They're still the same pills. They're just not coming from a sanctioned or a monitored or licensed pharmacist that is being watched by the government. And then at that time, because we were talking about naloxone and Narcan, it wasn't readily available as a tool. It wasn't really out in the public. People didn't really hear about it. People didn't really care. Programs like DARE were still encouraged in our schools and in our systems, and I will stand up here and tell you till I'm blue in the face, DARE failed. DARE doesn't work. I wish it did. Telling people don't do drugs in school sounds perfect. It didn't work. We failed the war on drugs. We lost. I will say that till the end of my career. Until the war on drugs is over, but it is. We lost. I'm sorry. Not sugarcoating it. They were telling people drugs are bad, but then never what to do when you find somebody under the influence of drugs. And that's where a lot of overdoses came in, because you'd find somebody you wouldn't know what to do, or it was too late, or you were afraid of the stigma. So then after people lost their prescriptions and people lost their ability to get prescriptions from the right sources, unfortunately, this sounds kind of facetious and kind of horrible, but insurance doesn't cover drug dealers. So you have to pay out of pocket with cash for these pills that are still expensive. Pills get expensive, and then when you can't afford it, you need the next best thing, which is going to be on the next slide. And it sounds horrible that the next best thing is heroin. Heroin is an opioid. Heroin is derived pretty much from the same thing that Vicodin and oxycodone and all those drugs are. They do the same thing. They attack the same part of the brain in your opioid receptors. It's achieving the same effect, and it's significantly cheaper. So, 2010, after people started losing their prescriptions, you saw them start to turn towards harder drugs and heroin, unfortunately. Usually heroin's injected via intravenous injection with syringe. It's very fast acting because it's in your system immediately. When you take a pill, it's usually coated, goes into your stomach, and your stomach has to break it down, then it enters your system. Heroin's going right into your bloodstream. There's nothing stopping it. And who knows what's in it. It's twice as potent as prescription pills, so you're able to achieve the same effect for much less. But you build up a tolerance, so you start taking more, and it snowballs. It's easily made. It's very crudely made. You have no idea what's going in it. It's unsanitary wherever it's coming from, and it can be mixed with all kinds of things. Heroin, inherently, I guess, if used correctly, isn't as dangerous as it sounds. The problem is that people are using dangerous concoctions mixed with it, and they have no idea where they're getting it from, and they're using too much. And then you run into your overdose and your deaths that way. So you have no idea where it's coming from, what's in it, what's part of it, and then you got your second wave of deaths on the next slide coming up. So in 2013, approximately 7,000 Americans suffered fatal overdoses directly stemming from heroin. That's averaging 20 people a day. That's just about a person an hour across America. In 2013 was dying from a heroin overdose. I want you to remember that number for a few slides. Heroin-related deaths, though, over that time frame that we were talking about with pills across 2000 to 2010, were rising 6% steadily every year. I hate to say it, that's kind of the goal. You don't want it skyrocketing. Just as the population goes up, your numbers go up. You want your numbers to go down, but from a public safety standpoint, you want to keep the course. You want to be able to maintain what you've had. Where you see these epidemics and these pandemics come out is when the system is overloaded, which is what happened in 2010 to 2013. Deaths then went up 37% per year. Numbers between 2010 and 2013 and farther into the teens skyrocketed. EMS and fire and police, they were chasing down more overdoses than you can think of, and they didn't know what to do. They were becoming hard to combat because we don't know what's in them. We don't know what you took. We don't know what's in the syringe. It's not labeled. It's coming from who knows and where. And it could be labeled with different brands, different logos, comes from different people, and it can be mixed with stimulants or benzodiazepines, which is referred to as a speedball or an 8-ball in the streets. As a paramedic, I hate drugs, but I hate speedballs and 8-balls because you have no idea what's happening. You can be overdosed and showing signs of an opioid overdose, and it's easy. I'm going to Narcan you, I'm going to get an IV, I'm going to put up your nose, I'm going to do something to stop that opioid overdose. The problem is the overdose was from the opioids was probably protecting what else is in your system. Usually in Harrisburg it was PCP, it was cocaine, it was benzodiazepines, it was meth. So I'm going to take away what's suppressing the worst stuff, which you think, oh, what's worse than heroin? But you put PCP and heroin together, you get the good effects and the good effects of both. And you're right in the middle and you're doing fine until something happens. Usually the heroin takes over, it's a little more stronger, and then you overdose. So then I Narcan you and you wake up and now you're high on PCP. If anybody remembers PCP, that was usually what came out of Miami with the bath salts and all that stuff, and that was the zombie apocalypse. People walk around like they're on zombies. Cool, I'd rather honestly keep you asleep at that point, which is kind of tough. I hate to tell people that, but if I roll up and somebody goes, hey man, he 8-balled, as a paramedic, you're not getting Narcan. I'm just gonna force you to breathe through a bag and a mask, or you're gonna get put on a vent, and we're just gonna let it ride. Yeah, not fun. So this time naloxone started becoming more prevalent around United States emergency services. We always had it, we just really didn't use it that much. Now, 2010, 2013, and then through the 20-teens, it is being used immensely. And then, unfortunately, we enter our third wave, which is the drug that everybody talks about today, fentanyl. That's the big word. Everybody, all the news networks, they all want to talk about fentanyl. Fentanyl is a medication. Full disclosure, paramedics use fentanyl every day for their patients. I give people fentanyl all the time. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. It was originally developed for cancer patients to help with pain and end-of-life care. Thank God, I've never gone through cancer. People in my life, I had an aunt that died from cancer, and unfortunately in the fire service, we talk about it's not if, it's when. There's actually federal law that protects firefighters and their payments for cancer treatments because firemen are pretty much guaranteed to get cancer and usually die from some sort of cancer. Fentanyl was designed to make you happy as you die. That's kind of mind-blowing. And then it hit the streets. And then it got worse. It got so much worse. Like I said, it became popular in the late 2010s, teens, and it peaked right around COVID, 2020, 2019. Big third bullet point right here. So pills were taking away people's pain and they were making people happy. They were making you live life. Heroin was more potent. It was twice as potent. Fentanyl is 50 times as potent as heroin. The same dose of heroin and the same dose of fentanyl, it's 2%. Like, I don't know how to explain, like, the amount of fentanyl you need to achieve what heroin does is minuscule, and which is why it's kind of becoming scary in our communities, because it can be hidden, and that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit. You're seeing that a lot of overdoses are happening from people who just don't know. But fentanyl at least can be taken through several routes. Usually you'll see IV users, same thing as heroin. They'll inject it through a syringe right into their bloodstream. It can also be used subbucally, which is inside your cheek. I've heard people back in Harrisburg refer to them as Tic Tacs. Take a little piece of cloth, or usually it's toilet paper, you dip it in the liquid fentanyl, stick it in your cheek just like a dip or a chew or something, and you just let it in your bloodstream. And then of course you can use it dermally, which is not as successful. A lot of people don't love that. We'll talk about how Big Pharma tried using fentanyl patches. They're not that successful, at least for people who try to use them. And then inhalation, you can snort it, you can sniff it, you can do all kinds of things. So the third wave of death comes around. And in 2022, I told you, remember that number for when heroin skyrocketed in 2013. In 2022, 74,000 Americans suffered fatal fentanyl overdoses. That's 12.6 times more than it was in heroin in 2013. Fentanyl's potency, its addictiveness, and its ability to be easily mixed with other drugs, without the knowledge of the user, is what's leading to the higher cause of death. There are plenty of people, specifically young people, who I run into on the streets that are dead because they smoked a joint. They're like, oh, I'll never do hard drugs. Weed's fine. And in reality, weed doesn't kill people. Weed is weed. It's becoming legal. There are safe places to get it nowadays, and police officers don't care. The problem is you can put micrograms, and when I say micrograms, like that's what we measure fentanyl in the medicinal world. It's micrograms. It is thousandths of a gram. That can be sprinkled onto a joint, and you have no idea it's there, and it's enough to kill you. A maximum dose for a paramedic, you get 100 micrograms. I can repeat it once in like 10 minutes. If you're having that much pain after that, you're done. You're not getting any more pain meds. Those are nothing compared to what's being hidden inside other drugs, and people don't even know. Because there is no overseeing body. There's no DEA on the street watching who's making drugs and where it's coming from. There's no way to know. And fentanyl's potency is so quick and so rapid, we're too late. It's so many times. We'll talk about the timing here in just a minute. I show up as a first responder, and usually if somebody's dead right away, I'm like, yeah, they're dead. They're gone. And there's a lot of times I find myself not even touching the patient. I'll check for a pulse. We'll check to make sure their heart rhythm is a flat line truly. And then if you're showing signs of irreversible death, you don't have a chance. And that could be within an hour. That could be minutes. You never know. And there are people who we still try. We'll give you 20, 30 good minutes of the best medicine in the world that even an ER physician or the hospitals are going to give you. And after those 30 minutes, someone who smoked a joint and just kind of laid back in their couch, they're done. 30 minutes. I don't even take you to the hospital. That's a crime scene. Later, I got somebody else to go Narcan. Somebody else to go take care of who's having a heart attack. Like, I hate to say it, at work, it's become so desensitized because you're dead, on to the next one. Because there's 74,000 people that experience that, unfortunately. And I have to bring that number down. And there are people we are saving. There are people I can bring back right away, which we'll talk about. But that's kind of like the not sugarcoating thing I talked about. This timing is very important. That's what we're having you guys here today to do, is to help me. Because there are a lot of times you call me to help, and I can't do much unless you guys help me first. So some common myths about fentanyl. This next one it'll make me laugh, and I may have to explain it. I've seen police officers overdosing by touching fentanyl. Is that possible? No. You can not touch fentanyl and overdose like a certain sheriff's deputy did in San Diego. No, it doesn't happen like that. I actually if I'm close with a police officer that I know, and I know a lot of them, I'm very friendly with them, usually on car accidents, they'll jump in the back of the ambulance, they're talking to the patient as I'm talking to the patient, and I'll pull out fentanyl to give to people because they're in pain, and if it's a friend of mine, I'll be like, whoa, it's fentanyl, watch out, be careful. We gotta laugh at something in this job. It's, like I said, become desensitized, but don't be worried about it. If it touches you, wash your hands, wear gloves, don't touch it. If you think you got something on it, let somebody know, be monitored. But like we talked earlier, dermally going through your skin, very minimal. It's not going to, like that, it's not going to drop you dead the way that you're seeing these myths. The next one, can fentanyl be absorbed through your skin, like we were just talking about? Very poorly. Fentanyl is a terrible dermal medication. Big pharma companies have tried spending millions of dollars on fentanyl patches. There are some that work, but usually they come with poor reviews and people just ask for pills, or they ask for different pain treatments. And they're usually getting something in the hospital, IV through a pump or something. And then the other one is I'm terrified of fentanyl. I hear about fentanyl all the time. Fentanyl's horrible. I'm talking about how terrible fentanyl is. I never want that to enter my body. It's a medication. We talked about it. It was meant for cancer treatment patients at the end of their life to feel at peace. I use it every day. ER physicians use it every day. It eliminates pain so quickly if used correctly. And we use it on a daily basis, and I'm never concerned about overdosing somebody. I go to school for years to learn how to be a paramedic and work in the back of an ambulance and treat you, and fentanyl is one of those drugs that's a controlled substance. I am monitored by the government. I am watched over by the DEA, and every time I give it to somebody, I have to report it. And if I overdose you, I have Narcan, and I lose my job. So if you're in the back of an ambulance and you have a car accident or something, you broke a leg or something, and the paramedic goes, hey, I'm going to give you some fentanyl, usually I go, by the way, it's okay. It's coming from a lab. It's coming from a factory where it's made and monitored. So I want the stigma of fentanyl to go away, but also realize in the back of an ambulance, I'm not going to give you something I picked up on the side of the street and in a syringe that hasn't been cleaned. Like, we are held to all the same standards as the entire medical community, even though I'm in the back of an ambulance. And then what is naloxone? Obviously, we just talked about the three major drug groups. We just talked about the three major waves that were killing people across this country over the past 25 years. So naloxone or Narcan is a type of medication that's called an opioid antagonist. So what actually goes on in your brain when you take an opioid, whether it be pills, heroin, fentanyl, is your brain has opioid receptors. So this medication goes and it attaches to that part of your brain, and then it suppresses your pain receptors. It makes you not feel pain throughout your entire body. Unfortunately, that part of your brain is also what controls your breathing. So that's what people die from, really, in overdoses. The fentanyl and the heroin isn't going to chemically kill you, it's you suffocate. You stop breathing. You eventually breathe slower and slower and slower until eventually you stop breathing. And then you have a very limited time before you stop breathing, before your heart stops. And then when your heart stops, you stop pumping blood, and then so on and so forth. At that point, you're clinically dead unless you can be reversed. Big stickler is, we say this to everybody, is that naloxone has no effect on somebody who does not have opioids in their system. If you Narcan somebody that you think is having an overdose, and the paramedic says that they're having some other medical emergency, because a lot of medical emergencies mimic overdoses, strokes, diabetic emergencies, psychiatric emergencies, naloxone won't do anything. That's okay. Give it anyway if you think that you're experiencing, or you're with somebody who's experiencing an overdose. Narcan cannot hurt you. That is the greatest thing about it. That's why we call it a rescue drug, and I can give it to people that I'm suspicious of in little doses because I just want to see, is that what's going to happen? And if not, fine. Great. That's a check in the box that I know what's wrong with you, and it helps me take care of you. And for you guys on the street, if you run into somebody, give it. If you have it, give it. It's fine. It's not going to hurt people. I use it in an injectable, in a paramedic stance. It is in a paramedic setting. I can either give you a shot if I can't get an IV, or I'm going to be usually giving you an IV, and I can give it right into your bloodstream, and just as quick as the fentanyl and the heroin's in your system, the Narcan's in your system just as fast. It can be administered through prepackaged nasal spray, which we have for you guys today. Very important part that we're going to talk about is the patient has to be breathing. The person has to be able to inhale that medicine, to get it into their bloodstream. Unfortunately, if you find somebody who's not breathing, which we'll talk about, Narcan might not be the best first step. It's easy, you can still shoot it in their nose, and then that takes a few seconds. But there are maybe some other things that you need to worry about, which we'll touch on. So, recognizing and responding to an overdose. This is cakewalk for me, but I'm realizing, being out in the community, my everyday of my life is the worst day of your life. I respond to the worst day that you've ever had down in Anne Arundel 15 times a day in a 24-hour period. That's just numbing to me. I'm fine. I go about it. It's nothing. But then I realize that people don't understand what they're looking at, and they're terrified because of what they don't know. So opioid overdose symptoms, what to look for. So symptoms of somebody who is conscious, somebody who is awake, is still having a medical emergency, but we're in a pretty good spot. If you find somebody who's overdosing and they're awake, a little bit of a sigh of relief, and for all of this, I tell people, take a big deep breath. I am terrified right now in front of a crowd. Take a big deep breath, you can work through it, it's fine. It's very simple when we break it down. So somebody who's conscious is going to be very drowsy, they're going to be very tired, they're going to be very slow to respond, they look like they can't keep their eyes open. They're going to have a slowed breathing rate. An average adult breathes 12 to 20 times a minute. It's about every 4-ish seconds. If the person is breathing every 10 to 15 seconds once, that's slow. That's another sign. If they're struggling to keep their eyes open, open their eyes and flash like your phone flashlight in their eyes. And if their pupils are pinpoint, and we're talking like you look at them and you think their pupils aren't even there, those are pinpoint and they're not reactive usually because they're so pinpoint. That is a telltale sign of an opioid overdose. They also have a very slow speech. They're having a lot of trouble getting the words out because they're not thinking right. They're very confused and usually they're going to be sweaty. Their body's kicking into overdrive. They're not sure what's happening. The body's not sure what's happening to it. It's just firing on all cylinders to try to figure out what to do. If you find somebody that is unconscious, I put it at the bottom, but it's in red. Check their pulse. It is very easy. 2 fingers right on the corner of your jaw. Just put it right there and you can feel it. If you can feel a pulse, great. Work on the next part. We'll talk later what happens if you don't feel a pulse. But if they are slow breathing and they're unconscious, or they're snoring, usually snoring is another telltale sign, they are not able to what we call maintain their own airway. That tube going from their mouth and their nose into their lungs is collapsing and they're not able to get air into their lungs. That suffocation is starting. So also, if they've gone past that, if they are what we call apneic, they are not breathing. You are looking at this person and they have a pulse, you can feel it, but there's a very fine line and a fine time frame where somebody is not breathing and their heart is in overdrive, trying to push as much oxygen around their body until it's out of oxygen. And we'll get into that too, but they're going to be pale, very dry, very gray, and then the inside of their lips, around their lips and their nail beds are going to be blue. They are turning what we call cyanotic, and that is the lack of oxygen. Another good way to tell, if you're concerned about it, if you take your fingernail and you squeeze your fingernail, it'll go from red, or like pinkish, to white. If it returns to its normal color in 2 seconds, your heart is doing fantastic. If at some point it stays white or it's blue and it stays blue, you are not moving oxygen to your fingertips, which is the farthest part of your body. Now we know there's a problem because you're supposed to have oxygen everywhere in your body. And check a pulse. Check a pulse. A lot of people check a pulse in your wrist. You have to have a blood pressure over a systolic, that big number, has to be over 80 in order to be felt in your wrist. You can sustain life, not for long, below 80. This is 60. Some people 40. If it's below that, you're pretty close to death. So that's why we tell people if you can't feel a carotid pulse, start CPR. Because at that point, your heart is not beating strong enough anyway because it's not putting blood into your brain. And this is the important part that we're going to go into. So next slide is a very important part, is that people who experience overdose symptoms don't know they've overdosed until it's too late. A lot of the times, it's they get sleepy, they get tired, they get drowsy, and they're just going to shut their eyes for a second. I'm just going to relax, because that's what opioids do. They make you relax. Just let me shut my eyes for a quick minute. Usually that's it. That's where that starts. And then they're just following that plateau where they're going, and then it drops. And that drop is where we need, in the field, and 911 responders, we need your help. Because we don't know when that drop happens, obviously, until they're found, and hopefully we're found quickly. So if you find somebody, on the next slide, who has or you suspect is overdosed, call 911. I cannot help you if I don't know that somebody needs help. That is the biggest thing. We lost the slides, no. So call 911. We're going to touch on it a little bit. Pennsylvania and federal law protects everybody on the scene of an overdose, including the patient and all bystanders and family, if you stay there and you help. It's the Good Samaritan law. It was added in the 2000s and the late 90s. I don't know exactly what date. As long as you stay there and you help the first responders and you answer their questions, you cannot be held liable, even if you did something wrong. if you gave the person the drugs, if you knew the person was on drugs, if you just call 911 and you help them and you help us, you cannot get in trouble. They realized that people were not calling 911 in drug communities or people who were experiencing overdoses because they didn't want to get in trouble and they were leaving their family members to die. And then we would find them beyond reasonable help, as we call it, where I'm showing up and I'm not even doing anything. You're that far gone. So, if we're back, maybe not. So, I got it here, and hopefully I can talk through it and you guys can understand without looking. What do paramedics do in an overdose? So once we get that call, that's very important, and this is going to be a little bit of my soapbox moment, and where I'm going to kill some time. When you call 911 in Lancaster County-wide Communications is the name of the agency that answers the 911 point. Thank you. Next slide on activating the 911 system. Calls are taken through LCWC. It's up in Mannheim. It answers every phone call for 911 for police, fire, and EMS in Lancaster County. And they're quickly triaged by trained professionals and call takers based on location, call type, and emergency. Just out of curiosity, does anybody know what the first question is asked of you when you call 911 is? Usually it's like, oh, what's your emergency? That's the fourth question. It's, what is the location of your emergency? I'm at 85 Brant Boulevard. Okay, is that the church? Yes. It's in East Hempfield Township? Yes. Okay, what is your phone number and your first and last name so I can call you back in case we get disconnected? If the phone call ends there, a police officer knows where you are. Fire and EMS, they're going to be held up a little bit because we don't know what is happening. It could be anything from I stubbed my toe to an active shooter. So we're going to send a police officer first. But at least they know. And they go, okay. And they ask you, what's your name? That's the third question. And they say, in your words, what is happening? What is the emergency? There's your fourth question. That takes up to a minute in a perfectly calm, back and forth conversation. There's sometimes I still get worked up if I have to call 911, but a perfectly calm conversation with me on my day off and I find a car accident could take a trained paramedic upwards of 45 seconds to tell the dispatcher what's happening. Now, flip side, you just experienced this for the first time in your life, and you're calling 911 for possibly the first time ever, because it's the worst day of your life. You are calling 911, and you're freaking out. Really good example, and I hate to bring it up, it wasn't overdose related, but I was in New Holland as a paramedic, and we were dispatched to a cardiac arrest. Somebody's not conscious, not breathing, doesn't have a pulse, and they're trying to deliver CPR instructions. We come to find out that we were sent for an unknown age, unknown gender, unknown circumstance, person, and the females on this line screaming, and all they can get is they're gone, they're gone, they're gone. Just over and over, blood-curdling screams. So they sent a police officer, and they're like, well, obviously somebody must be dead, so let's send the fire department, let's send paramedics, let's send an ambulance. Everybody get there. It was in the far reaches of New Holland, up in East Earl Township, so we're not quick out there. There's a lot of ground to cover. We showed up with two police officers first, followed by 2 ambulances, 2 fire trucks, and 2 paramedics. The first police officer showed up 5 minutes and 16 seconds to find out it was an 18-month-old. Yeah. That's rough, because that was not what we were prepared for. We were actually bringing all of our equipment in for an adult male that we were told was also beyond help. Somebody that we weren't even going to worry about. Gone. Ended up being a baby. That poor dispatcher just heard screaming and at least got us there. They actually had to triangulate the address. They had to track that phone because all they heard was just incoherent screaming from the mother. Take a deep breath. I understand this is the worst day of your life when this happens. That person on the other end of the phone is trained to get the information out of you. You just have to work with them. Answer the questions, try to listen. So once they become available, like I said, it can take 1 to 2 minutes. Units are then dispatched by run cards and availability. I was talking earlier, this is my thing. This is, obviously opioids and Narcan emergency administration is my thing, but this is my thing. EMS currently across the country, doesn't matter where you are, what state, city, borough, county you're in, EMS is currently at its lowest staffing ever, and the call volume is the highest it's ever been. We are being asked to do more often, with less people. There is no guarantee that your local EMTs and paramedics are available to help you. Right now, off the top of my head, I can think that there are 2 ambulances that are pretty darn close to this church. And if I were to look right now, I would be a betting man to say neither of them are available. So we're waiting on Columbia, maybe Mannheim Township, maybe Lancaster City. There are days routinely at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, you will find that Littitz's ambulance and paramedic from Warwick Community Ambulance is on their way to Millersville for somebody having a life-threatening emergency, routinely. Not too long ago, I was the paramedic in Leola. Pretty slow at night, so I went in, I expected not to do much, but I'll do what I can. About 11:45 at night, I was sent on an unconscious person, about an 81-year-old male, obviously not opioid related, but it was an unconscious male, so that's still in my mind. Maybe he took pain pills that he's had his whole life. Who knows what's going on? And they sent me to a street that's off of Eden Road. And I lived at Manheim Township's fire department, and I know Eden Road. It's right down the street from Leola. I'm like, oh, it's nothing out of my way to go to Eden and like the village over there on New Holland Pike. It's 6 minutes away. So I pulled it up on the map, and it said 39 minutes. I was like, what? So I called the dispatcher on the phone at 11:45 at night, because I want to say it on the radio and be an idiot. And I was like, hey, where am I going? Like Eden Road? And I'm looking, I'm like, that doesn't say Manheim Township, it says Eden Township. You guys have it wrong. I'm not going to Eden Township, I'm going to Manheim Township. They're like, nah, man, you're going to Quarryville. By the way, his wife is doing CPR now. He's not breathing. 39 minutes. I was the first one there. I went from Leola to Eden, Lancaster City, shot over to Strasburg, went south, and then went past Quarryville. He was alive. For the time being. 39 minutes. Imagine your love of your life. For whatever reason, opioids, anything, has a medical emergency, and you watch him drop out of bed like this lady did. And they say, all right, the paramedics are on their way. Order Domino's, it'll be there quicker. That's painful. That's painful. There are days I go into New Holland, and I'm the only paramedic east of Lancaster County for the whole county. We're talking from Berks County, Chester County, to Maryland. That's a standard. That is what's happening in these days. Lancaster EMS has just revamped their whole format. I do not want to speak for them. That their paramedics are not on ambulances anymore. They're in SUVs. They're in cop cars racing around because they have to get places so quickly, and then they show up, and it's not a advanced emergency. It's not a life-threatening emergency, but so they'll drive to the hospital. So that ambulance is now committed with a paramedic driving, and the EMT could be in the back. Or the paramedic could be in the back. It doesn't matter. That ambulance is now committed. Now another farther ambulance has to show up, and a farther ambulance has to show up, and then a farther ambulance, and you're running into times where Leola's ambulance is going into Lancaster City, Littitz's ambulance is going into Lancaster City, Lancaster City is going to Ephrata, Ephrata is going to Manheim. Like, we're all over the place. It used to be you had your territory, now it's LCWC will dispatch a call and hope somebody hears it. Hopefully somebody's showing up. There's no guarantee, and this is, like I said, it's my soapbox. I could talk about it till I'm blue in the face. But the big numbers is the response to our scene. So the NFPA, which is the National Fire Prevention Association, is the Bible for firefighting. This is what we hold ourselves to in the fire service. This is a whole book that is reviewed every few years, and they change it, and these are the standards, usually in a court of law, that the fire department is held to if we mess up. It requires standard 1710, I want to make sure I quote it correctly, that a career response agency to arrive on location of an emergency in 5 minutes and 20 seconds after leaving the station. That works when your ambulance is there. I believe before I started this, I checked real quick. Littitz's ambulance was going to East Pete. That's not that bad, and it took them probably 12 minutes. So they're more than doubling the required minimum. I wish I could go on about it. This is why we need your help. Because if you find somebody who's overdosed in a car at a supermarket or anywhere or in your house or on the side of the street, you call 911 and you think they're going to be there. No, we're not. I work in a career two-tiered fire and EMS system where we send a fire truck on a majority of our EMS calls. People get so confused down there when we show up with a fire truck because your chest hurts. It's because we have more fire trucks than ambulances on the streets. And we carry all the same equipment, just can't take you to the hospital. It's a pretty fun ride, though. I'm sorry. Love riding a fire truck. But that doesn't happen in Lancaster, unfortunately. Just the way it is here with the system that's run, and it's not anything between a career or a volunteer career. It's just that that's not what the fire service is asked to do, so it falls on the shoulders of EMS. And there's less of us. There's less cops, there's less firefighters, there's less EMTs and paramedics. It's going to take a very long time. And there are also days that they're not there. There's no required staffing for private, for-profit, or non-profit-based EMS. By the way, Lancaster County is maybe 3 or 4 off the top of my head agencies I can name that are not private-based EMS. They are private-based EMS. They're just there, and they get no tax funding, and they're there to collect a paycheck because that's how they run. You can't make somebody stay if the truck has to go. Like, if somebody calls off tonight in the East Hempfield truck on Harrisburg Avenue or Harrisburg Pike, somebody calls off and nobody picks up the overtime, Rohrstown, Salunga, and the southern side of East Hempfield Township now doesn't have an ambulance. Sorry. You're now waiting that so much longer. So that's my big soapbox. Talk to your elected officials, get tax funding, help us help you. But that's where the last bullet point is. The initial treatment is so important because we then have to get the person out of the house. We have to get them into the back of an ambulance. And there's only 2 of us. It's not easy. I'm a big dude, and moving me around is not fun. And the majority of my patients are bigger than me. Care continues in the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital. It's not done there. We have to continue taking care of you and get you to the hospital. And then the next slide, the importance of being a good Samaritan. Remember those timings that I was talking about. Time is of the essence. So brain death sets in after 4 to 6 minutes that your body has been without oxygen. There are 2 types of tissue in your body that will not regenerate ever once it is killed and it is hypoxic and is without oxygen. It's your heart and your brain. We can work with your heart. It's muscle. We can strengthen it if you're having a heart attack. We can build stronger muscle, or we can get better blood flow, or you can have a heart transplant. I can't do that to your brain. When you start losing oxygen to your brain starts dying. You have 4 to 6 minutes before that's irreversible. After that, tissue can never be recovered or regenerated. We just talked about the time frame. That gentleman down in Quarryville, his wife was doing CPR, which, as a trained first responder who's been doing this ever since he was 18, 2 minutes of CPR is what I'm expected to do. After 2 minutes of CPR, I need CPR. It is not fun. It's not enjoyable. My back hurts. I am out of breath, and it is mentally and physically draining. That's why we pay $75,000 to have a machine do it for us at the fire department, because we just don't have enough people, and you're drained and you're tired, and then you're probably going to do it again somewhere later in the day. It's not fun, and then you're asking average lay responders and lay people and good Samaritans to do it. I hope you can make it 60 seconds. I really hope you can, because you probably won't, and it sucks, but it helps something. Getting people to help you is the biggest thing, but people don't know unless we're out here doing this. So this is why we need your help. And then we talked about the farther distances. Like I was just saying, that gentleman, 39 minutes. His wife was told, your husband's dying and you need to help save his life, because even the national standard is 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And that's perfect. You're already in that window of brain death. You've already started. And we're never meeting those standards. It doesn't happen. So we talked earlier, legally, you cannot be held responsible and you cannot get in trouble in Pennsylvania for calling EMS for an overdose. The police department will show up. I'm telling you, on an overdose, the police department is coming. It's okay. If you're terrified of the police department, you hate the police department, I don't love the police department half the time, but it's okay. They are not going to arrest people if you are there helping, if you are doing what's in the best interest of the person having the emergency, and you stay and you cooperate. You cannot be held for any legal reasons. And it says that, quote, in Pennsylvania requires that the person reporting an overdose remain with the victim and cooperate with the police in order for either party to be granted immunity. If you call 911 and then leave, and they find out you had anything to do with this person's overdose and they die, you are not legally liable. Stay there. It's okay. So the next one is, what do you do when you suspect an overdose? Step number 1, we talked about it. Call 911. I cannot come and help you, and we cannot start that clock until you call 911. I am going to be sitting in my truck somewhere, doing paperwork, training, something, and I will keep doing that until you call me. Every second counts. 911 dispatchers are your lifeline. They are trained to guide you through a lot of questions. The number one thing I hear about people when I show up on scene, because they're not talking to me on the phone, is, why'd you ask so many questions? Why didn't you just get here? That happened a lot in Harrisburg. We were sent to unknown EMS emergencies hourly. 911, what's the location of your emergency? It's at 85 Brant Boulevard. What's going on? I need an ambulance. Why? Because I said so. That happened pretty much every hour. It still does. Who do you think you are to be asking me questions? Just send them. Depending on what you said and depending on what we know, they won't even call the ambulance. They'll send a police officer to go figure it out. So now you're waiting on the police officer to probably be waiting at a red light, show up, and then say, oh crap, I need an ambulance. You're setting everything behind, so it's okay. They're gonna ask you a ton of questions. It is the worst day of your life. They know how to work you through the questions. Just gotta be able to listen. Next one is that if you find somebody who's overdosed and you have naloxone, which everybody will after today, use it. Okay, we talked about it. If the person's then not overdosing, nothing happens. They just have a wet nose now. Perfect. And then after you've given the naloxone or the Narcan, ensure the patient has what we call a patent airway. Open that tube, open that airway to get air into their lungs. Easiest way to do it is roll them on their side and then open their jaw. Get that mouth open. If they're on their side, that also prevents them, hopefully, from aspirating and vomiting into their lungs, because one of the side effects of Narcan is vomiting. If they're on their back and they're laying flat, even if you open that jaw and you open their mouth, nothing is more gut punching than somebody who survives the overdose and then suffocates on their vomit. We almost did it. So roll them on their side. It's what we call the recovery position in EMS. It helps you recover when you breathe. The number one thing I do, if you are having some sort of life-threatening emergency in the back of an ambulance, I flip you on your side. Because I've got other stuff I got to worry about, but that just fixed about my first 5 things on my checklist. And then if you find the patient's not breathing or they don't have a pulse, the 911 dispatcher on the phone is going to walk you through it. But if you're already checking and you can't feel a pulse, start doing chest compressions. If anybody's not taken a CPR class in the past 5 to 7 years, they do not teach rescue breathing anymore. Do not breathe into the person's mouth. Start doing compressions. Pump on their chest. Just keep going until the person either wakes up and says, hey, stop. Okay, they're alive. We did it. Or until first responders get there. The great thing about when you have, I don't want to say great thing about when a cardiac arrest, is that a cardiac arrest pretty much nationally is what we call an all call. So if you have an overdose, you're going to get a police officer, maybe 2, hopefully an ambulance. You're not getting a fire truck unless you are where I work. Everywhere in America you have a cardiac arrest, it's an all call. Every single emergency provider gets a page that is on duty that says go. Get there. Get, like I told you about the kid. We didn't even know it was a kid. That was 3 cops at the end, 2 ambulances, 2 paramedics, and 2 fire trucks in New Holland. It's everyone go. Somebody get there and somebody figure out what's going on. And we always say that if you're not sure, start doing chest compressions. I would rather you do chest compressions on somebody who's alive than withhold them from somebody who needs them. You can always break your friend's ribs and then make fun of them for it later. You can't make fun of them for it if they're dead. Again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but it needs to be said. A lot of people tell me when they do chest compressions, I'm scared I'm going to hurt my friend, my family member. Doesn't it hurt when I do that? They're dead. They're dead until proven otherwise. And in reality, in the eyes of science, if you don't have a pulse and you're not breathing, you're dead. It's my job to flip that around. And then you're clinically dead. If I show up, there's so many times that 911, we get sent on a cardiac arrest, and the first thing we're told is family members are refusing to do CPR. Usually, now think for a second. I can't tell you the last time I showed up and there was somebody doing CPR on scene. Usually a police officer or a firefighter is the first person to do it. And usually, well, you've already found that person, so who knows how long they've been down to begin with, and then it took us the 4 to 6 minutes to get there. So just do it. If you don't know how to do it, there's great classes you can teach. If I can give you a quick crash course, is you take your hand, put it over your palm, and you find that notch right in between the middle of the nipple line, and you press. And you are going to, if you do it hard enough, which is fine, you're going to break every single rib on the first go. The second time you'll break the rest of them. It's okay. Keep going, and this is so messed up, but sing Staying Alive. The song Staying Alive is 120 beats per minute. When we do CPR, even with the machines that are calibrated, we are beating your heart 120 times a minute. And I guess it's good. It's staying alive. I don't know. It's kind of dark and twisted. But again, we got to laugh about something. So what should you do after you administer naloxone? So stay with and stimulate the patient. From a paramedic, this is what we do. You can do a sternal rub. You can pinch loose skin. You can squeeze hard objects on the nail bed. I call it the pen trick or the pen test. You take a pen, put it in your fist, squeeze it on their nail bed. If you do it to yourself, that is one of the most painful things in the world. You can't lay there and fake it and play dead. If you're alive and you've got anything working in your brain and you're just trying to pretend or whatever, youch, that hurts. Sternal rub is another good one. If you don't know the person and you haven't searched, I'm not saying search them because I don't think it's a good idea for you to search somebody if you are not a police officer. So what we do is we call sternal rubs. You take your two knuckles, you put it right where you would normally do CPR, and you dig back and forth. That hurts. People are getting good at faking that though, so that's where you do the pen trick. Keep their airway safe like we talked about. And then if the patient wakes up, they're going to be incredibly confused, they're going to be incredibly disoriented, and they're usually going to be combative. And they're going to vomit a lot because their body just got that flood of Narcan, and that Narcan says, get it out. Best thing you do, puke it up. Get it out. Sometimes they're not awake for it. That's why you got to protect their airway. But they're confused, they're disoriented, and they're combative. Full disclosure, that's not the drugs. Heroin and fentanyl and opioids do not make you combative or confused or disoriented and violent. You don't have oxygen in your brain. You weren't breathing. So the first sign of somebody who is, for any reason, hypoxic and doesn't have oxygen in their brain is they're confused and they're angry. Because it's fight or flight at that point. And for them, it's fighting time. Because they just went to go close my eyes for a minute, and now they're laying flat on the ground. There's a bunch of dudes in badges, and look like me. Some dudes have guns out because you have no idea what's going on. And you're now confused because your brain doesn't have oxygen. It's usually where I got into a lot of my fights when I was 18, 19, working in Harrisburg, and now I've grown up and realized I was a really rude guy to those people. Because I'm like, why are they fighting me? Why are they punching me? Why am I getting into fights all the time? Because they don't know. They're confused. Put yourself in their shoes. They have no idea what's happening. They just took a little nap, and now their world's crashing, and they're surrounded by people they don't know. Allow them to get their first few breaths in. They're not going to wake up right away, but they are going to snap up if you give them a full dose of the Narcan that we give you. They are going to come up swinging, and there are times that you might be in for a heavyweight bout. Get yourself out of there, get yourself free. And the next slide we'll talk about is don't restrain them, because if they're combative, you got to protect yourself, because we're already showing up for one patient. I'm bringing one ambulance, so we just talked about it. It's already hard enough to get to your house or the supermarket or the car. Now I need two because you just got punched in the face. Well, guess who's waiting? You. Because I'm going to take the other guy to the hospital, or gal, or whoever. Make sure we're in the right. Yes. So, what if the patient's combative? Let them go. We are trained on how to handle that. We talked about sometimes people take 8-balls or speed balls. They're not necessarily, let me backtrack. When I said the drugs are not making them combative, heroin and fentanyl don't make people combative, the oxygen does, unless they've speedballed. If you take cocaine or you take PCP and you wake up and you start swinging, look, I've tried fighting people on PCP. It's not fun. I've seen grown men pick me up over their head and body slam me at 6th and McClay Street in Harrisburg. And that was the last call I ran in Harrisburg before I went down to Baltimore, because I almost broke my shoulder and I couldn't work for 2 weeks. And he was on PCP. Don't try to fight people on PCP. There are stories I've heard, and I've never seen it in person, and I hope I never do. There are stories I hear of police officers unloading their handguns and rifles and shooting people, and they don't stop running in full sprint. You're not going to stop that. But you stop the heroin. We can work with that. We can work with, we're checking off boxes, so that counts. And then part of that Good Samaritan law is give responders exact details. Were there other drugs involved? Where did the drugs come from? Did the patient know that they were taking drugs? Did they know that they were taking drugs? Were they taking what they wanted to take? And do they have a mental health history? Was this a suicide attempt? Because that changes everything now. I hate to say it, this is part of the not sugarcoating. A lot of people overdose on opioids to commit suicide because I'm just going to shut my eyes for a moment. Drift away. It's where we get a lot of our overdoses are suicides. And it sucks because those are the people who don't want to be found, and we find them too late. But the reason we ask those questions is not because we want to know where you're getting your drugs. Honestly, the cops are too busy trying to find that stuff and other things. Half the time, police officers don't care. We just want to know what's in the community. So that way we can go to the hospital and start telling the hospital, this is what's out there. A perfect example, two different opposite sides of the spectrum though. I was in paramedic school and I was working alongside the Reading Fire Department, and 6:30 in the morning, we found some dude laying face down on the side of the street. We roll up, pick him up, throw him on the stretcher, throw him back in the ambulance, and like you see in the movies, I tell people all the time, that is not a dramatic job. Our job is so boring half the time, and movies make it horrible. I hate Chicago Fire. But it was kind of like in movies. We just scooped him up and threw him in the back of the ambulance, and we realized he's overdosing. He's got the track marks in his elbow, he's got the pinpoint eyes, and he's snoring, and he's gray, and he's sweaty. So just to double check, because it takes 5 seconds, somebody who's diabetic and having a low blood sugar emergency is snoring, they're sweaty, their skin is pale, and they're usually unconscious. They don't have the pinpoint eyes though. So I was like, okay, he's got the pinpoint eyes. He's obviously overdosing. Let's just check his blood sugar to just make sure. Well, it was in the 480s, which if you know anything about diabetic care, you want to be as close to 100 as possible. So they were almost 5 times the amount of sugar in their body, which is what we call diabetic ketoacidosis. It is now killing your kidneys and your liver and your brain, and you can die from having too much sugar in your body. This gentleman was following that track. He was not diabetic. So now we're like, hold on, wait a minute, let's give him the Narcan. He woke up and started swinging and fighting because he was altered and he was confused because he was overdosing on sugar now. The overdose of the opioids were done, and now he's too much sugar in his body that his brain doesn't know how to operate. So then we had to sedate him again, take him to the hospital. Come to find out, a shipment came through Reading that week where they're cutting heroin with powdered sugar. And then you take powdered sugar, you melt it, and you inject it right in your bloodstream. Your stomach is not breaking down the sugar, your liver is not breaking down your sugar, your pancreas is not releasing any insulin because it's already in your bloodstream. So now that's a totally different emergency. Come to find out, it's because they were giving it to people who were putting it inside their cheeks because it tasted sweet. This guy bought the same thing, injected it right into his veins. I don't know why, he didn't taste it. But, and then opposite side of the spectrum, when I was in Anne Arundel, one day we found some dude leaning on the brakes, overdosed, unconscious in the middle of an intersection. Green light, sitting there. Not even at the white line. He rolled forward and then must have fell over and hit the brakes again. He was just sitting there. We find that a lot. You'd be surprised. We'll just pull up to an intersection and we're like, that guy's not breathing. And we have to break open the car, put the car in park, and yank him out. And they've overdosed driving down the road. This guy, throw him in the back of the truck, yada yada, whatever, do the same thing. We check his blood sugar and it's 40. That is less than half what it's supposed to be. Same thing. He's gray, he's diaphoretic, he's sweating. So we give him Narcan, he doesn't wake up, and we're like, okay, so maybe it wasn't an overdose, whatever. And the cops come up and they're like, hey, we found a bunch of heroin and a bunch of baggies and stuff in his car. We're like, okay, maybe it was heroin, that's weird. So we take him to the hospital, we give him some sugar, and then we learned that there was a shipment that came through Baltimore that, and I do not know how they do it, I'm gonna ask my pharmacy friends how this works. They somehow cut the heroin and the fentanyl with powdered insulin, I guess, because it then lowers your blood sugar, so then your body releases more blood sugar, and then it helps your metabolism kick up, so it puts your fentanyl in your system quicker. So it works faster. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, drug dealers are really smart people. And they know how to make this more powerful and more addictive, and because they need to make more money. They're going to do whatever it takes. And this is high-grade, medical equipment that they're mixing in with fentanyl. And then I have to deal with that. So that's why we're asking for those details. That's why we're asking, we're not getting anybody in trouble. It's I want to be able to go back to LGH and talk to the community teams and say, hey, you're about to get a whole lot of this. Unfortunately also, a little bit of tidbit of information, we usually see the most amount of overdoses on the 15th and the 30th of every month. Welfare checks. Everybody who is a drug seeker, unfortunately, who's homeless is getting the welfare checks, and those people who are in those demographics, of course that is not the whole demographic. I tell people all the time that opioids are the least racist, transphobic, and homophobic community you'll ever find because everybody dies from opioids. It's everybody. But you find people who are on welfare, and they wait till they get that paycheck, and they buy as much as they can for the next 2 weeks. So our overdoses spike those days. And that's when you find new shipments too. So we're just trying to gather that info, so that way I can come back and bring you guys more info. And then you guys can give me more info, and it helps us because 911 is so reactive because we don't know what's happening until something's happened, and you call. We want to try to nip that in the bud and get it happening before it happens. The next one is going to say that after administering naloxone, check your kit. The ones you're going to get today have a QR code. Scan it. It's going to take you to a website, and it'll help you document what's happening, so that way we can get more in the communities that we need. I can tell you, speaking from the eastern side of Lancaster County's point of view, we are not tracking that because not in my community it happens. But I've overdosed people in Amish communities. I've overdosed people in Mennonite communities because I've Narcan people in every community. It happens. People think Harrisburg, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, New York, that's where Narcan needs to be. I had a very near and dear friend of mine who actually went to Hempfield School District. His little brother overdosed in Bent Creek. Multi-million-dollar house. He was 17. Had no idea that his Xanax had fentanyl in it. So, it's rough. But we need to document that. Because who knows? Who would have ever thought off the top of your head that we need Narcan in Bent Creek? But we do. We need it everywhere. So documenting that, scanning that QR code, going into the website, and reporting that you've used that dose these agencies and these government responsibilities and all these people are going to start bringing more Narcan to our pharmacies for you guys to get. They're going to bring it to the hospitals. It's done a wonderful thing is that in Anne Arundel County, prior to when I got hired in 2017, 2018, we started tracking it, and then we realized that the best thing to do is that people who we wake up and are perfectly fine after a Narcan administration usually don't want to go to the hospital. I can tell you about 3 out of 5 times they're not going to the hospital because they don't want to. They don't want the stigma. They don't want anybody to know, and they don't want further treatment. They just want to deal with it themselves, or they want to keep using because it's so addictive. So we started doing what was called leave behind kits, which I really wish we could get behind in EMS, but people here in Lancaster just aren't aware. We're just a little behind the times, and that's not anybody's fault. If somebody overdoses and I'm the paramedic at work and I give you Narcan and you don't want to go to the hospital, I'm giving you Narcan that you're getting today to take with you. And if you're a good Samaritan who stayed there and you used your Narcan, the paramedics, at least in Anne Arundel County, are going to give you a replacement Narcan because we're realizing that we need your help. We were killing too many people down there because people didn't have Narcan. People were staying, people wanted to help, and the number one question we got was, well, how can I help next time? And then we couldn't give them our Narcan because it's in a syringe and we have to shoot it in your bloodstream, and we can't teach you how to do that. And then, of course, that puts more syringes in the community. But we're realizing that you need to help us with those numbers, with those QR codes, and with all those websites to put more in the community to protect those people. So we're going to talk a little bit about administering Narcan after we take some questions and how to use it. So the nasal spray kit, there we go. So it's going to be a little, if you've never seen it before, it's like a little T-handle syringe type thing, a little plunger. You hold the device with your 2 fingers like this and your thumb underneath. It's kind of, I don't know, I said like a baseball, but once you hold it, you realize it doesn't look like a baseball. You put the nozzle in somebody's nose. Don't have to put it that far up, just make sure it's in the nose, and you press, and 1 spray is 1 dose. Like I said, as long as they're breathing and they're able to inhale, maybe give them a little bit of a sternal rub, because when you do that, it makes people naturally want to do that. Once that gets in their bloodstream, that's a dose. Press the plunger firmly, make sure it's all in there, make sure it stops spraying, and then once it stops spraying, pull it out, protect yourself. Wait 2 to 3 minutes while they're in that recovery position. And then if they don't wake up within 2 to 3 minutes, and hopefully 911 has been called at this point, give another dose. You're allowed to. You're not going to overdose somebody on Narcan. I joke with police officers about that because we're taking 20, 30 minutes to get to a scene, and our dispatchers are saying, like, hey, just so you know, police have given their 6th round of Narcan. Stop. It's not an overdose at that point. Stop giving them Narcan, because I'm going to have to, I jokingly say, I'm going to have to now give you fentanyl to fight the Narcan in your system. That's not true. That was a joke. And it's a bad one. Like I said, bad sense of humor. We need it. Give them another one. Give them another dose if you have a 2nd round. It can't hurt them. And then at that point, hopefully you're getting somebody to show up on the scene, police officer, firefighter, EMS, paramedic, something. They can then take it from there. As long as they're breathing, they're fine. That's the biggest thing. Narcan, the way I use Narcan, is it's a wonderful thing. When I was in Harrisburg, I used to shoot up your nose and wait for you to wake up and you're walking out to the ambulance because I don't want to pick you up. It's now in where I work down in Anne Arundel County, we have a fire truck on all of these calls. I have 6, 7, 8 people with me. So I'm going to give you a little bit to keep you breathing, and then we're going to take you to the hospital while unconscious, but I'm going to keep you breathing because when you get to the hospital, you can get into rehab. Unfortunately, that's not what everybody wants, and they leave anyway, and then the same people overdose, and I Narcan them again. But that's okay. It's giving you the avenues to get there and get treatment. So the avenues on how to get Narcan. You're going to get some tonight, but also local pharmacies. You can get them from local pharmacies, and I believe they can be through your insurance. I'm not super well versed in that because I just go into my stock room at work and I pick up Narcan and I put it back in my truck. That's how I do it. I believe there are some other ways that the local agencies can help you get it for no cost, possibly, through Lancaster County joining forces, to which at that point I'm going to kind of kick it back to Kate and the other guys and gals we have here today. And then just remember for the last one we have on the last slide, hopefully, maybe? There we go. It can happen anywhere, anytime. Like I said, I worked in Harrisburg. There were days I ran out of Narcan in Harrisburg, and you think it's a city problem. Harrisburg's 32 minutes away. I told you it's happened in Hempfield. It happens in Columbia. It happens in Lancaster. It happens in Amish country. And it doesn't always happen to people in substance abuse disorders and people who are addicted. I had a very wonderful, amazing young woman in Harrisburg who her 13-year-old found her overdosed and she wasn't breathing. She did CPR. We Narcaned her, and she takes Oxy for her sciatica that she got delivering the 13-year-old. She woke up and had really bad pain. She took 2 that day. If her daughter didn't find her, she'd be dead. It can happen to anybody. It's not, it's the stigma needs to go away. It's everywhere. People need to get help. It's not a personal problem. It's not a crime problem. It's important to recognize the signs because it can be anybody. Call 911, support your local libraries, all that fun stuff. I'm gonna kick it back to Kate. She's gonna talk for a little bit, and I think we have hopefully a little bit of time for questions. Maybe, who knows? But thank you for having me, guys. It was awesome. I'm very glad we could get this info out.
I'm a mite shorter than Simon. Thank you, Simon, so much. I know I've learned a lot this evening. As I mentioned, so we have kits thanks to our partners at Lancaster County Joining Forces through grants that Penn Medicine and LGH have. The folks there have worked so hard to secure for our community. We have kits for everybody who's here tonight. So these are, like Simon mentioned, these are the intranasal spray kits. And you'll see Joining Forces has made it pretty easy. There's lots of information in here. There's gloves. There's the QR code to scan so you can track if you do have to use this kit. And then there's also instructions and all kinds of good things in here to help you save a life if you need to in the community. Our friends at Compass Mark have also provided some information about prevention and also Addiction Resource Center. So we have a drug deactivation system. So folks are welcome to not only take Narcan kits with you this evening, but also you'll see these on the table as well. These have come from Compass Mark, and these are used, so the instructions again are on here, but it's a pouch and you would sprinkle it on medications if you're looking to dispose of drugs or opioids, right? You sprinkle this on so that you can safely then dispose of the drugs. So these pouches are also on the table with the Narcan kits as well for folks to take this evening. Simon mentioned, how do we get naloxone, right? How do we get Narcan if you're not here tonight? How do you get it? And so our friends at Hillcrest Pharmacy, which is a female-owned pharmacy in Hempfield, right? The address is Columbia, but they are really close to Mountville, right? Our friends there have sent over some information for us so that you know how to get it. Most pharmacies have naloxone available over the counter. It may be $45 or $40, depending, on whether it's generic or brand name that they have on the shelf. So that is one option. It is over the counter. It is also behind the counter at the pharmacy. In Pennsylvania, there is a standing order so that you can go to the pharmacy and request at the desk with the pharmacist to get naloxone from behind the counter. In those instances, you might be paying your copay, right? Your pharmacy copay. Sorry, that was a hard P. The friends through PACE for our seniors, right? If you're familiar with the PACE program with your prescriptions and things, a lot of pharmacists don't realize, but you can maybe educate your pharmacist. And I have a paper here that Hillcrest shared with us, but for seniors who are involved with the PACE program, if you order naloxone through the standing order, so you would pay your copay, they can then bill PACE to pick up the difference so that you are receiving your naloxone for free. Free ways to get it. Not only will you get it for free tonight because we work with Lancaster County Joining Forces, but you can go on their website anytime and fill out a form to request Narcan, and you can go pick up kits. It's a very simple online form. If you need help using it, please email us at HCBI and someone will gladly walk you through the process. It's very easy. You can get it through, like I said, your insurance company without a prescription. You don't need a prescription there. And it can be delivered to your home as well through state programs like Next Distro, which I have a website for that if anybody's interested in having it delivered, because not everybody has accessibility to go to the pharmacy and pick it up or to go pick up from LGH directly. So you can have it mailed to you as well. I just, again, want to say thank you to our host this evening, our community partners, to Simon Jarosky for all the information you shared with us this evening, and for each of you for being here. This isn't necessarily an easy topic to talk about, but it's something that we as a community are responsible to each other to understand and to support each other in those moments of emergency. So we can talk about prevention, in another time, which we're looking to do. But right now we just are kind of bound and obligated to help each other whenever we can. So thank you all for showing up and being good neighbors in that way and being interested and being here for each other. So give yourselves a round of applause, please. Thank you. And to get your kits this evening, Zion has so graciously opened up it's called, what is it called? The zone, right? So you come out of the sanctuary at the back door here and just go straight down the hall. You'll see the room is open, it's lit. There's some cookies and coffee and some snacks back there while you go and grab your kits. And big thank you. Again, there's information on the table. And if you want to connect with each other or ask Simon some questions, we have, another 10 minutes or so for that. So please join us over in the zone before you head out. Thank you, everybody.